As an Amazon associate, we earn from qualifying purchases. This podcast is supported by its listeners. If you choose to purchase something using links on our website, we may earn a commission. No books were warped, dog-eared, underlined with purple pen, eaten, cursed, cancelled, burned, or otherwise harmed in the making of this podcast. I'm Tom Tolkien, and this is the School Reading List, a podcast that recommends books you'll want your children to read and books you'll wish you'd read as a child. To kick off episode 25 of the School Reading List podcast, let's rip open some book post. And first up, from HarperCollins Children's, The Snowman Code by Simon Stephenson. The Snowman Code tells the story of a friendship between 10-year-old Blessing and Albert Framlington, a 600-year-old snowman. Set in a perpetually wintry London, they tackle bullies, recover Albert's lost love, and confront the endless winter. Aimed at 7-plus-year-olds, this heartwarming festive tale addresses themes of anti-bullying, mental health, climate change, and the power of friendship. It's perfect for family reading during frosty nights and for reading to Key Stage 2 classes as the afternoons darken in the run-up to Christmas. A potential classic in the making, The Snowman Code is highly recommended. Can We Live on Mars by Giles Sparrow. Can We Live on Mars explores the challenges and possibilities of human life on Mars. It looks at problems posed by distance, landing techniques, and survival, as well as exploring solutions to living in a thin atmosphere with extreme weather conditions. The mind-mapping approach simplifies complex scientific concepts, making the information in this book highly accessible and interesting for 8 to 11-year-olds. Family by Patricia Hegarty, illustrated by Britta Teckentrup. Through lyrical rhymes and gorgeous artwork, Family explores how species from dolphins to elephants care for and support each other. Each die-cut page opens a portal to different landscapes. It's the perfect book to read, share and explore with younger children, and a great text to return to and read again with older children. Part of the acclaimed Peek Through Nature series, it celebrates the joy of life. This beautiful, enchanting and inspiring picture book is highly recommended. And from Scallywag Press, Milo's Hat Trick by John Agee. Milo teeters on the edge of losing his job after a series of less than successful magic shows. In one last-ditch effort to find the right rabbit for his act, he discovers a clever bear who offers to help out by hiding in Milo's hat. But a hilarious hat mix-up leads to chaos when the bear unexpectedly jumps out of the right hat in the wrong place at the wrong moment. John Agee's clever storytelling and expressive illustrations encourage ingenuity and friendship as Milo learns valuable life lessons from the bear. Highly recommended. We Can by Alexandra Strick. This inspiring collection of children's voices encourages a positive vision for a better world. 15 children plan a vibrant festival, and this book follows their story, highlighting themes of community, activism, and environmental stewardship. With activities such as mural making and mindfulness, there's a pervasive message of hope and collective action. This book not only encourages creativity, but also empowers children to contribute to a kinder, greener planet. You Only Spy Twice by Ben Sanders. Agent Harrier digs up dirt on a file-stealing traitor within the secretive Bark spy agency. Taking an unexpected turn, the pages of this fast-paced graphic novel begin to repeat, and an ink-deleting weapon threatens to erase everything. This lively and innovative take on the spy genre combines bold graphics with catchy wordplay. It's the perfect short text for readers moving from picture books to more complex stories. Super Ocean Weekend by Gaëlle Alméras. Castor, Squeak, Orny and Ekid take an unforgettable camping trip when they explore ocean life and conservation. This bite-sized, fact-packed, full-colour paperback with thin stock pages uses a graphic novel format to explain marine science, including tides, fish behaviour and ocean ecosystems. It's perfect for children aged 7 to 12, Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3 libraries, and book clubs focusing on environmental issues. Cobweb by Michael Morpurgo, illustrated by Michael Foreman. Cobweb follows a Welsh corgi taken from a Welsh farm and his loving owner Benson, who is set to work herding sheep on a dangerous journey to London. Set during the Napoleonic Wars, the story reflects on war, humanity, and the magical bond between animals and humans. Will he ever find his way home? Cobweb combines Morpurgo's sparkling storytelling with Michael Foreman's timeless illustrations. The result is a warm, memorable, and deeply satisfying story that's perfect to read to groups in Key Stage 2. Presto, Magical Recovery Co. by Rutendo Dione. When 11-year-old Amber discovers her uncle is a thief who recovers stolen items and missing people from fairy tales, she realises that's why the big bad wolf is in her Brixton sitting room. Amber then embarks on a mission with her uncle to rescue Little Red Riding Hood with help from Hansel and Gretel, deep in the mysterious world of Evadne. This distinctive and enchanting adventure effortlessly merges familiar fairy tales with twisty and thrilling adventures. It's ideal for 9 to 12-year-olds who want to read something completely different. We Do Not Welcome Our 10-Year-Old Overlord by Garth Nix. When Isla finds a mysterious orb in the woods, she discovers its powers can give her control over other people. But her older brother Kim worries about whether the orb has a more sinister nature. Set in an alternate 1975 Canberra, the narrative follows Kim and his friends as they confront the consequences of Isla's new powers. This highly engaging middle-grade novel explores friendships, family dynamics and ethics through a deliciously page-turning plot. Highly recommended for 10 to 12-year-olds who love science fiction and Dungeons and Dragons. Damien Ike and the Fallen House of Draven by D. Benson and David Arlo. As the child of a powerful mage, Damien worries his lack of magic skills will damage his family's reputation as he grapples with the pressures of legacy and identity. But everything changes when he discovers a disturbing secret that throws his entire future into doubt. Fear, prejudice, and expectation will be talking points when discussing this thought-provoking fantasy. Handle with Care by Louisa Reid. After Ruby unexpectedly gives birth during a GCSE history lesson, she faces rumours and isolation when friendships and loyalties are tested to the limit. Told through alternating prose and verse, the story highlights themes of secrecy, responsibility, and emotional turmoil. Ruby's decision to place her child for adoption does not bring the expected resolution, and the unflinching exploration of the characters and situations is one Key Stage 4 students are bound to be sucked into. This visceral and often startling novel examines complex teenage lives with a laser focus. Highly recommended. We think Handled with Care will be a breakout hit with 14-plus-year-olds. I Shall Never Fall in Love by Hari Connor. Set in Regency-era England, I Shall Never Fall in Love follows George, who hides their gender identity while managing the family estate, and Eleanor, their best friend, who's facing pressure to find a husband. The close-knit friendships come under strain as George and Eleanor struggle with unspoken feelings in the face of an unaccepting society. This compelling graphic novel, with detailed illustrations and nuanced characters, includes themes of love, identity, empathy, and history. Inspired by Jane Austen, this fresh, queer, slow-burn graphic novel romance is Bridgerton meets swoon-worthy Gentleman Jack for 2020's teens. Thank you to all the publishers and publicists for sending us books to review here on this podcast and on our website schoolreadinglist.co.uk. Here's our rundown of great new children's books hitting the shelves this November. Beanie and the Bansheenie by Eoin Colfer and Steve McCarthy. The Circular Saw by Simon Phillip and Neil Clark. Shila's Wood Wide Web by Eva Jukuzovic and Gillian Flint. Amazing Jellyfish by Michael Staveridge. The Last Kids on Earth by Max Brelier and Brian Sharia. For She Is Wrath by Emily Varga. When It's Your Turn for Midnight by Blessing Musariri. The Nutcracker by Anna Kemp and Sarah Ogilvie. How to Be a Revolutionary by Lucy Ann Unwin. The 39-Story Treehouse by Andy Griffiths and Terry Denton. Search for Carmela by Chloe Savage. Yetis Don't Exist by Kate Thompson and Loretta Shah. The Murder Hypothesis by Sarah Wishart. Blue, Barry and Pancakes by Dan Abdo and James Patterson. Mission to Mars, Can You Survive in Space by DK. Silver, Cosmic Love Story by Olivia Levez. Girls by Annette Schaap. Yes, Boys Can by Jonathan Jirovich and Richard V. Reeves. A Beginner's Guide to Choosing the Perfect Pet by Ali Rutstein and Tommy Doyle. When the Stammer Came to Stay by Maggie O'Farrell and Daniela Jaglenka. The ADHD Teen Survival Guide by Soli Lazarus. In Praise of Mystery by Ada Lehman and Peter Cease. So Over This by David Fenn. Heist Royale by Kavian Lewis. Rainy, Chowdhury, Must Die by Adiba Jaigerda. Drawn Onward by Daniel Nyeri and Matt Rockefeller. How to Sing a Song by Kwame Alexander and Randy Preston. Classics in Graphics, Shakespeare's Othello by Steve Barlow and Steve Skidmore. Rise and Fall by Peter Allen. Wisdom of the Woods by Rachel Piercy and Freya Hartus. And our picture book of the month is The Search for Carmela by Chloe Savage. Our non-fiction book of the month is Rise and Fall by Peter Allen. And our fiction book of the month is When It's Your Turn for Midnight by Blessing Musariri. Booksy Book, let's get reading. If you're a teacher, librarian, or avid bookworm who loves children's or YA books, and you'd like to review brand new titles for the school reading list, get in touch by email. We'd love to hear from you. The address is reviews@schoolreadinglist.co.uk. And this month we take a deep dive into some of the newest books on our Year 4 reading list for children aged 8 to 9. Dave Pigeon, Kittens by Swapna Haddow, illustrated by Sheena Dempsey. Mean Cat is acting strangely, and Dave the Pigeon and Skipper fear the worst. But an unexpected turn of events and some very cute kittens force them to see cats in a new light. Fast-paced fun and frequent illustrations make this series ideal for less confident readers in lower key stage 2. Michael Rosen's book of Very Silly Poems by Michael Rosen. Organised into themed sections like Festering Food and Amazing Animals, this lively poetry collection features wickedly funny verse, subversive playground favourites, and both short and long poems. It offers plenty of variety to encourage reading aloud and conversation. Michael Rosen's book of Very Silly Poems will remind 7 to 9-year-olds and their teachers that poetry can be silly, accessible, and immensely entertaining. The Wonder Brothers by Frank Cottrell Boyce. When Blackpool Tower disappears, Nathan and Middy, the Wonder Brothers, begin a roller coaster quest to bring it back. Travelling to Las Vegas, they encounter the legendary magician Perplexion in this gripping, funny and well-plotted chapter book that explores magic, illusion and the unexpected. With diverse accents, wonderful illustrations and relatable child character narration, this is an ideal class reading book for Year 4 children. The Girl Who Wasn't There by Jacqueline Wilson. Luna and Aurora embark on a fairy tale-like house move to live in a tower, but reality sets in when the tower needs repair. Dad's job becomes precarious, and Aurora's imaginary friend starts to cause problems. Is the tower cursed? Readers will find out in this gripping drama that explores family life, the power of imagination, and resilience. Highly recommended for more advanced readers. The Incredible Adventures of Gaston Le Dog by Michael Rosen, illustrated by Vivian Swartz. Gaston Le Dog longs to find a beach he remembers, and as he tries to locate it, he meets new friends and faces unexpected challenges. With fairy tale characters, magical scenes, laugh-out-loud adventures, and thought-provoking moments, this is a wonderful story to read aloud with Year 4 classes. The lively illustrations will appeal to less confident readers looking for a more challenging first chapter book. The Dam by David Armand and Levi Pinfold. The Dam tells the true story of a father and daughter who play music in an abandoned valley before it's flooded by the construction of Kielder Water. Through David Armand's narrative and Levi Pinfold's illustrations, this book captures the power of music to preserve memories in a place soon to be lost. Inspired by a real event, this story is a work of art that prompts children to think about how we deal with change. A Different Kind of Freedom, a Romany story by Richard O'Neill. Richard O'Neill explores the life of Lijah, a Romany boy growing up in 19th century Sheffield. Lijah helps his family with scrap gathering, enjoying the freedom of the traveller lifestyle. Facing difficulties at school, he discovers a love for football, a sport his father doesn't like. While training secretly, Lijah learns about the life of Rab Howell, a famous Romany footballer. This moving, personal and memorable story points to tensions between tradition and individuality, giving a rich insight into Romany culture. And if you'd like to have a look at these books in more detail and the rest of our Year 4 books, there's a link in the programme notes. Here's a selection of exciting new book tasters sent to us by new and self-published children's authors this month.
Smart Fiona is my debut children's novel. It was independently published in May 2024. It's aimed at 8 to 12-year-olds, and it's about a 10-year-old girl who gets sucked into her smartphone. The apps come to life and interact with her. She has to rescue her friends and defeat a monster. But whilst this is happening, her phone's battery is slowly dwindling down to 0. If the phone's battery goes down to 0, Fiona is stuck in the phone forever. Think of it as Alice in Wonderland retold for the 21st century, or The Matrix for kids. There's a subtle moral weaved into the ending about kids not using screens too much, which should appeal to teachers and parents alike. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, this is Dr. Katie Chisenga Phillips. I'm a mum to a 1-year-old, a junior doctor, and an author of a children's picture book that I cannot wait to tell you about. This book is called I Can Be an Astronaut, and it's about a little girl who dreams of being an astronaut and succeeds despite the fact that not many people look like her. This book is beautifully illustrated, and it's so important as it promotes diversity, inclusion, and representation. This is particularly important for me because as a junior doctor who is a black female, there weren't many people around who looked like me when I was studying medicine at the University of Cambridge, so I really wanted my daughter and other children who look like me to have a book like this, to know that not even the sky is the limit. I really hope you enjoy it, and I hope that you think about getting a copy for yourself or your loved ones. You can find it on Amazon.
Have you heard how dangerous it was for an old woman to swallow a fly? If you think she could die from that, wait until you read There Was an Old Woman Who Followed a Spy. In a twist to the much-loved rhyme of a lady who has had enough to eat, Tommy from Ottawa and his daughter Tabitha bring you a new adventure. Tommy's the 7th of a dozen children, and then, just for fun, collected his own dozen children. When it comes to storytelling, he has had to tell them all, just to survive. If you choose to accept this mission, you'll find the children's picture book, There Was an Old Woman Who Followed a Spy, on Amazon.com, being released on November 24th, Black Friday. There Was an Old Woman Who Followed a Spy. It might be the beginning of a new series where old women of legends become sleuths in private eyes. You'll have to read it and decide. But then again, perhaps she'll die.
Hi, I'm Melissa Abraham, the author of Are We There Yet? A picture book aimed at children aged 3 to 7 years, beautifully illustrated by Simone Douglas. Join Sarita as she embarks on an enchanting journey, crafting fantastical answers to her endless questions. My story features a playful conversation between a patient mum and her curious young daughter. The book is available from Amazon and Waterstones Online.
If you'd like to get in touch and leave a recorded shout-out about your upcoming self-published children's book, have a look at our podcast webpage for more details. What are we reading for? What holds back a positive reading culture in schools? Schools face numerous challenges in cultivating a positive reading culture that encourages reading for wisdom or pleasure. From limited resources to restrictive policies, these barriers can severely impact children's attitudes towards reading. In this piece, we look at how these practices prevent schools from nurturing a love for reading and categorise the different levels of reading cultures in educational settings. Let's consider the reading culture spectrum from positive to negative. It's important to examine and discuss with school staff the purposes of reading in school. What are we reading for? Are children reading for pleasure, reading for wisdom, reading for enlightenment, reading for character, or just reading for academic progress? What do these phrases mean? What do they translate to each day in your setting? What concrete measures can you put in place to develop a positive reading culture? Schools can create a spectrum of reading experiences for students, ranging from those fostering autonomy and enjoyment to more restrictive or mandatory approaches that limit reading freedom. In the podcast notes, we've included a scale of reading culture levels, from the most positive to the most restrictive. Reading for wisdom or enlightenment. Here, children choose. In the most positive reading culture, children are empowered to make informed choices about their reading. They have excellent access to books, librarians, and a range of resources, with minimal restrictions on reading materials. In reading for pleasure, there may be positive guidance. Teachers and librarians provide guidance by recommending books based on students' interests and reading levels, offering support while maintaining autonomy in reading choices. Strings attached. In this approach, a positive reading culture is present but hampered by mandatory reading records, structured reading assessments, and strict timing for book selection. These requirements add a degree of formalisation that can detract from the spontaneity of reading. Reading for apathy. In these situations, there may be fractured choice. Students may have reading choice, but limited access to books, library time, and reading role models restricts this autonomy. Opportunities for finding diverse and engaging reading materials may be constrained. What books? In this situation, children might not read at all. There may be no librarians, no suggestions, no posters or displays, few books, and no reading spaces. In settings like these, nobody really cares about reading. Reading for misery. In these situations, adults or computer systems select the books based on criteria such as vocabulary richness or educational value. This restricts student choice and prioritises prescribed educational objectives over students' personal interest. Cancel culture. In these situations, frequent purges of books by authors whose values are deemed controversial or outdated limit students' exposure to diverse perspectives. This approach can reduce the variety of accessible literature in school libraries. And at the far end of the scale, reading for indoctrination. Here we may see mandatory lists, with uniform prescribed lists of books that must be read by students, with limited regard for individual preference or interest. This approach often emphasises inculcation rather than voluntary reading. And the worst situation that we might see are book bans. In the most negative environments, books are banned based on religious, political, or social content, severely limiting access to diverse materials. Such restrictions constrain students' ability to explore a wide range of viewpoints through literature. So what are the most common barriers to achieving a positive reading culture in schools? Incomplete book collections. Schools that lack the full book series or updated library collections can hinder students' access to engaging, comprehensive stories. For example, an incomplete series like Harry Potter, Dogman or Inkheart on library shelves can interrupt students' reading continuity and dampen enthusiasm. A lack of reading modelling by staff. Teachers who do not actively model reading in class inadvertently signal to students that reading is not a priority. Instead of reading alongside students during quiet time, if educators engage in administrative tasks, the opportunity to set that example is lost. Limited access to visiting authors or storytellers. When guest authors, poets or storytellers visit schools, it's essential that students have access to these sessions. Prioritising assessments, sports matches or scheduling conflicts during these events can prevent students from benefiting from the enriching experience of meeting literary figures. Mandated reading records. Requiring students to log every reading session in journals may detract from the enjoyment of reading. Such mandatory documentation can shift the activity from pleasure to task-based, formalising an experience that should feel personal and voluntary. Having to read at least 10 pages or being required to write a 200-word review makes reading a chore, not a pleasure. Restrictive book selection periods. When students are given minimal time to select books, often under pressure, it restricts their ability to make thoughtful choices. Counting down from 5 and enforcing rigid deadlines for book selection can diminish the feeling of autonomy in reading. Telling children they must pick a book, any book, otherwise they'll have to read X, is not conducive to encouraging reading. Telling children that if they don't pick a book by the end of the period, they'll receive a demerit, written note or detention, etc., is not helpful. Focusing on reading evidence over reading enthusiasm. Prioritising formal evidence of reading, such as signed reading records, over the actual enjoyment of reading can deter students. You might want to hear every child read every day, but why do you need to report that and evidence it? Where does that data go? Is recording reading every day useful for the child, or is it simply a management device? A negative response to unlogged reading, such as disapproval for not recording, shifts the focus from enjoyment to mere accountability. Overly controlled book levels. Limiting students to books strictly within their reading level disregards individual curiosity. Prohibiting access to materials that may be too challenging or too simple restricts students from exploring topics of interest that may lie outside designated reading levels. Telling children they cannot read Y until they've read all of X frames reading as a task to endure and overcome. Neglect of community library resources. Schools that do not engage with local libraries or children's bookshops miss out on valuable resources that foster reading interest. Failing to connect with these community assets reduces exposure to diverse reading materials and people passionate about books. Many children don't have a library card. Many more parents wouldn't know how to sign up for one. Schools need to lead on this. Why not liaise with your local library to get the whole class, year group, or even the school signed up? repetitive book selections across year groups. Continuing to read the same class novels across multiple years, regardless of age appropriateness, can make the activity seem monotonous. Selecting age-appropriate, fresh materials for each class and each year maintains engagement and variety. Give your class autonomy. Involve them in the process of choosing each class novel. Stagnant reading promotion displays. Unchanged reading displays, especially with outdated posters, communicate a lack of active interest in reading. Promotional material that remains static or features staff who left the school many years ago fails to convey an evolving, engaged reading culture. If your school has a blank walls policy, remember that the two academic studies relied on to underpin this thinking are flawed, and there's actually no evidence to support the notion that 7 to 16-year-olds are distracted by wall displays. There's no evidence at all. More often than not, no wall display edicts in schools are set up by SLT teachers who are simply too lazy or disinterested to put up displays or celebrate pupils' work and learning. Limited library access and operating hours. Restricting library access to specific infrequent times can create barriers for students wanting to explore new books independently. Additionally, keeping the library closed before and after school further limits opportunities for voluntary reading. School libraries should be open every day, all the time. If barriers are created to this, perhaps challenge the personalities who are creating them and question their motives. The purpose of a school library is to encourage reading. Anything else is secondary. Outdated or poor quality reading materials. Retaining outdated, worn, or irrelevant books. For example, will humans ever visit the moon? Over fresh material can make reading resources appear neglected. Providing current, high-quality materials is essential to sustaining interest. Neglect of poetry. Poetry is an essential element of literature that often receives minimal attention in schools. When poetry is disregarded due to its limited role in standardized assessments, students miss out on a diverse and expressive literary form. Limiting physical interaction with books in shared reading. Minimizing physical access to physical books, such as by sharing one copy among multiple students, using photocopies or relying entirely on ebooks, reduces individual interaction with literature. Physical engagement with books is crucial for fostering that connection with reading. Inadequate classroom resources. A classroom that lacks comfortable reading corners, author displays, or recommendation shelves limits students' exposure to book suggestions and the comfort of a dedicated reading environment. Vague teacher interest in reading. When teachers express only a general interest in reading without ever discussing specific books, authors, or genres, students receive little guidance or encouragement to explore new texts. Encourage all adults to proactively model reading. That's teachers, teaching assistants, support staff, governors, and parents and guardians. Limiting non-traditional reading material. Restricting students to traditional books only and discouraging magazines, comics, audiobooks, or newspapers limits exposure to varied text types. Diverse reading material can provide a broader view of language and content, especially for reluctant readers. Prioritizing SATs papers over independent reading. In the lead-up to standardized testing, limiting Year 6 students reading to SATs papers in primary schools or Year 8 pupils to entrance exams in prep schools can stifle their independent reading interests and opportunities for relaxation and enjoyment through books. Prescriptive reading questions for parents. Supplying parents with differentiated reading questions, often focused on formal concepts like inference, can overly formalise home reading sessions. This approach can detract from a more spontaneous conversational exploration of texts. If you provide guidance to parents, focus on encouraging parents to get involved with the reading, model the reading, and make the reading fun and informative. Multi-purpose library spaces. When libraries serve as storage spaces or venues for other school activities, students may feel that the library's primary purpose is diminished. A dedicated library space communicates that reading is valued, a standalone activity. A library is a space to display and organise books and promote reading, research, and books. It's not a dumping ground for old computers, musical instruments, or sports bags. It's not a spare room for one-to-one teaching, support lessons, detentions, parental yoga groups, or mindlessness sessions. Use your library as a library. Strict independent reading conditions. When independent reading time is overly strict, such as requiring silent, upright reading at desks, it can reduce reading enjoyment. Enabling a relaxed and social reading environment may increase student engagement and interest. Lack of student ownership of reading culture. Preventing students from having roles as pupil librarians or recommending books to their peers limits their sense of ownership in a school reading culture, reduces their enthusiasm and sense of community around reading. Involve all your students in all aspects of the library: cataloguing, tidying, running, culling, purchasing, feng shui, pot plants, posters, displays, and loan recovery. Students who are involved care more than those who are not. Minimal book-centric assemblies. Rarely holding assemblies about books, aside from annual events such as World Book Day, or having punitive diatribes about pupils who haven't handed in library books, limits school-wide promotion of reading. Regular assemblies at school, house, class and tutor group level dedicated to books and reading can strengthen that collective enthusiasm. Omitting book discussions in staff meetings. Not allocating time in staff meetings for discussing books and reading limits opportunities for teachers to share recommendations. When school staff discuss and recommend books, it helps build a cohesive reading culture among both the staff and the students. Be sure to involve all your teachers and teaching assistants, not just your English and literacy staff. It's no good if reading and books are just an English lesson thing. Frequent cancellations of story time. Regularly cancelling story time, reading periods, drop everything and read, or whatever you call reading in your school, is a great way to stamp out a reading ethos. Call reading reading, no acronyms. Cancelling reading to attend to administrative tasks or errands signals that reading is a low priority. Reading isn't subordinate to sports matches, getting changed for PE, one-to-one lessons, getting in late from break, getting ready for going home. Your school would never treat maths lessons that way. Consistent, uninterrupted story time emphasises the importance of reading for pleasure. Establishing a positive reading culture in schools is essential to fostering students' interests in reading for pleasure and for knowledge. By identifying and addressing these barriers and recognising where schools may fall on the reading culture spectrum, educators and administrators can work toward creating an environment that nurtures a love for reading, encouraging students to engage meaningfully with literature. If you'd like to get in touch, use the hashtag SRLpodcast on Twitter or drop us a line using the contact form or messaging button on our website schoolreadinglist.co.uk. And all the books lived happily ever after. The end.